the topic that we're going to be covering today on the panel discussion is how can fintechs create a reliable lending infrastructure for both consumer and business finance? And we've got a good representation here on the panel. We've got Shwetang here who can bring in his industry views on the discussion. We've got Sachin and Hardika here who can give us a perspective as to what needs to be done from an SME finance, and of course, Gaurang to help us out in understanding what needs to get done for. Gaurav to help us out in understanding what needs to be done for the consumer finance business as well. So maybe I'll just start off the panel discussion asking the lenders here, the people who are interacting with the customer, as we went through the last year. It was a very difficult year for all of us, but as we went through the last year and going into March 2020, we were all thinking we are ready with our infrastructure, with policies, everything looking good, and then COVID happened. So in all honesty, maybe I'll start with you, Gaurav. In all honesty, what did you realize were the gaps in the infrastructure that you'd created for yourself, the lending processes? What did you realize was something that you were just not prepared for, besides the fact that there was a lockdown that was announced and there was no business and things got a bit difficult? But really looking at that situation, how was your the whole process impacted? What did you realize as were the gaps that you needed to kind of cover?
Thanks, Rashmi. So to answer your question, I think there were two areas specifically where we really kind of, after COVID happened, looked deep and hard. The first was underwriting and the second was collections, right? So on underwriting, obviously, look, we've been in business for more than 4 years now. So we do have, underwriting systems and algorithms that we've built up and kind of optimized over time. But I think just the magnitude of effect that COVID had and the kind of across the board impact that we saw. Obviously, one thing to recognize when you're building an underwriting system is you cannot build it for these kind of events, right? I mean, a COVID-like event will not happen every time. So you cannot optimize your system for that kind of an event, because then you would just do a very small volume of business compared to what you would otherwise, right? You would just lend to very few people. So that was not the point. But I think what COVID allowed us to do was kind of step back and just think about where the gaps were. Because as you mentioned, I think all of us in this industry, given that we're still, relatively small, building out the market, a lot of time and focus is constantly on growth, right? And so sometimes, we don't get the time to kind of step back and look at what we're doing. So I think, as I said, for underwriting, we actually took this opportunity to step back and look at, what kind of, what additional data points we could use for underwriting, how we could tweak our criteria so that some of the people who ended up demonstrating, a certain kind of bad behavior, we could have possibly detected, upfront through our underwriting. And so that, I think we spent a lot of time doing that. And then secondly, it was the collections aspect, right? So obviously that was a challenge for everyone in the lending business, right? Because across the board, borrowers had cash flow issues. And how to manage that from just a communication perspective, right? Because the volume went up manifold, right? I mean, the number of people who you need to touch base with and the number of people who are reaching out to you for some kind of help. I mean, both of those, figures went up dramatically. So I think where what we did during this period was figure out how to both increase automation, but at the same time, what we realized is that, automation wasn't working that well, because again, people wanted customized responses. So if everyone's getting a templated bot-like response, it's not helping resolve their problem. It's creating a negative perception for the company saying, look, you're not really listening to us. So I think that and what we did towards that end was a lot more kind of training. We actually ended up hiring a lot more people during COVID to handle this increased volume, right? So we decided not to kind of just automate everything and give templated responses to everybody. So it was a difficult, period, but I think we came out of it stronger in the sense that the lessons that we've learned during COVID, some of the processes that we implemented, all of those continue today, right? So yeah.
And Gaurav, you touch upon a very important point about customer engagement because even for us, we realized that there was a lot of inbound, interaction that was happening, and there was a lot of outbound interaction that we had to initiate in a very different kind of a manner. And maybe I'll come back to that point because to me, that has changed a lot, or the way we are doing that has changed a lot for us lenders. But I'll come back to that point later. We'll just park it the time being. But Hardika, your views on what did you realize about your systems, infrastructure, processes, and what did you?
Thank you very much, Rashmi. Look, obviously the pandemic came at a velocity that we did not expect, right? And it affected the micro enterprises, which is the community we work with, the sub 10 lakh monthly turnover customer segment. And for that customer segment, they went into an automatic shutdown. So the point that is being made around cash flow constriction is very valid. Now, in our case, all of our collections per se, first of all, we gave moratorium option to everyone. And so those who took it or wanted to take it, we offered it to everyone, even though the banks didn't necessarily offer it to us. Yes. But in terms of the collections piece, which is one area that we did do a bunch of work in, we recognize that our system of having a last mile distribution with branches and people where the first ACH or PDC fails, could not work while we were in lockdown. And while we had an online system of payment, customers who were in essential services had cash in hand, but unable to pay because the banks were not working. So there we tied up with Airtel Payment Banks and got access to the 5-6 lakh, last mile retail points, your recharge points, but the customer could just go 4 shops down or 6 shops down and just deposit the cash against his account so that he could maintain his credit as he did not take the moratorium. Now, this is something perhaps we would have done anyways, but what the pandemic did was accelerate how we put in all the infrastructure and the tech in place to do it very, very quickly. So I'll let Sachendra speak so that I don't hold all the time here.
Yeah. What was your? You're on mute, Sachin.
Okay. I would say we were relatively very new to have too much of serious disruption. As some of you might know, that we got capitalized in July of 2018. We started our business April of 2019, and we shut our business on 16th of March 2020. So 11 and a half months of real operation. To some extent, obviously, our whole focus, our view is that one of the challenges which we have seen with respect to digital lending and conventional lender, I think these are two different worlds. And, within my company itself, I have to always struggle with these two different worlds because at one side, we have these sets of people who come from data analytics, big data, machine learning, deep analytical. And the other side, you have conventional underwriting people who come from banks and financial institutions. And the bridge between them and bringing them together is the biggest challenge. And pandemic actually to that extent helped us because once you are an operative business, you don't get downtime, and we got a 4 or 5 months of downtime. So that was very helpful for us to what we say is that mission 100% digital. To some extent, we got 60-70% of that. In terms of how biggest challenge was because as this was nothing because we had a sizable liquidity and a sizable liquidity on our balance sheet. So we didn't have the conventional problem of what most of the other lenders were facing at that time. So we offered 100% moratorium to customers. Because of our digital platform, because of our sector focus, we could create what we call early stress scenario for all of our portfolio. We could contact 100% of our customer. And we had a very clear view, we created this mortality index, wherein we knew who would survive, who would not survive. But the challenge was that we were very eager to restart and go back to the customer and provide the support. But the whole methodology in which underwriting is done, wherein you look at the historical data, and we don't look at balance sheet, but we look at largely bureau data and others, completely became defunct. And the ability to forecast future cash flow when you don't know what is the end point of the pandemic was a massive challenge, continues to be a massive challenge.
True.
I think so. That's the large contrast there. And third, which is very unknown, that unlike consumer business, if you look at a consumer fintech and an ed tech or a health tech, you have only two parameters to deal: consumer and the platform. In our lending, actually, we have three things to deal with. Which is us as a lender or as a platform, the consumer, and our lenders. Our lenders actually live in a completely different world, right? And irrespective of how good you are or bad you are, they operate and think and perceive you, in a very different way. They are driven by what the market ecosystem is, right? So they doesn't bother if Kinara has done an excellent job or Ubro has done an excellent job. Something has happened into the system, they just go into retrieval mode. So and then you are stuck. I think so. That's broadly was it.
Absolutely. I think, thank you. You bring out two very excellent points, Hardika, from your perspective, saying that you were going to implement that, but the whole pandemic situation accelerated the whole thing. Was that you have small entrepreneurs who have cash, but did not have, or had to be trained, or had to be hooked on to the online platforms to be able to collect the cash. So it wasn't that the customer was bad, it was just had to be trained and educated to get onto that online payment platform. And by the way, we at Clicks as well were very early adopters of digital collection modes, as early as in March itself. And that was a big focus for us as well in March and April, to make sure that the customers, both SME and consumer, have access to that whole online collection mode. And Sachin, to your point that the ability to forecast future cash flows is still a challenge. Absolutely agree with you on that. I mean, even today, if we were to say, do we understand the consumer behavior well enough? Still, the answer to that is no. And maybe I'll just bring Shwetang in here. Shwetang, as you were just discussing, and the way, the point that Gaurav also made, that the whole need for customer engagement, understanding the customer behavior has really increased manifold. And I've myself read a lot of research that McKinsey has done, but what does your studies or your research indicate on what is the consumer looking at? And I'll come to a follow-up question, but let me first, get your answer on that. So this was the lender. We just talked about the lender side of things, right? And then there's a consumer on the other side who's gone through a lot of pain herself. And Sumi guy. So yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks, Rashmi. So I think the first thing to acknowledge is that a lot of consumers have come online for the first time during the pandemic. And while there were obviously people who were using online both for everyday aspects of their lives, there's a massive forced adoption that has been pushed across demographics, across business segments, because it was the need of the hour. So we see a lot of interesting insights coming out about when people are going online for the very first time, what are things businesses in general, and then especially finance companies can do to make life easier for them. And one of them is around the fact that a lot of them would like finance to be embedded as much as possible in some of their end use journeys. So if they're actually if it's a consumer, they're actually shopping online, it becomes very inconvenient for them to actually go offline and or go to a separate app and get that credit. To the extent possible, credit can be embedded and converged to their point of use is very important. Similarly, for businesses, like the ability to access and avail that loan is important. But the more importantly is the ability for them to share some of the data that they have, which is in the offline world, it's stuck in paper, or they're not able to communicate that effectively to lenders. Making that possible is something that is going to be very, very important. And anybody who can actually do that, overcome that barrier, will have that edge. And we see a number of interesting plays. The other thing that will happen is that this is also an area where there's a frequent amount of mis-selling, or not necessarily mis-selling, but some confusion about terms, conditions, etc. So anything that can actually make life more transparent for customers and give them the right tools to evaluate their changing financial situation and what that does mean for their obligations to lenders is also going to be well appreciated. And anybody who can take that trusted route to them, be that point of access where they can objectively evaluate what are the options in front of them, will also be something that consumers will like. And this is something that the need for this will only grow in the future as you see this first wave of consumers who are online for the very first time exploring a digital lending product. So let me pause there on those two key themes. And
Yeah, no, I think you make a very important point about customers understanding the terms and conditions because, and I'm sure Sachin, Hartika, Gaurav, you'll agree with me here that there have been provisions by the RBI in terms of trying to help the consumer. But for example, in case of moratorium, many of them didn't even understand because for a consumer, like while a company or corporate knows what a moratorium is, Gaurav, you will agree the consumer had no idea what a moratorium means in that sense, right? So they had to be educated to tell them, come take it, it's for your good. And now on the restructuring, it's the same thing, Shwetang, that we are facing with our consumer, with our SME clients. You've got, for example, we do school financing. We've got schools are saying schools are opening up. I don't need restructuring. And then there are the other conservative lot who got enough cash and saying, I don't know what's going to happen. Give me the restructuring, even though they don't need it. So I totally agree that we as lenders and all four of us will chime in here that we've also been advisors in the last 8-9 months to our customers to make sure they access the best product that's available in the market. So Shwetang, you're absolutely right about and laying out a bit of a framework around what is the consumer looking for, because finally at the end of the day, we will be driven by the consumer demand. Now, one point that you made was that finance should be embedded in the consumer journey itself, and that requires lenders to be very quick in their decision making about whether this is a customer they'd like to work with or no. So, what kind of consumer behavior parameters or features that you are seeing firms use these days to make these decisions? Where can we pick up these data points from? And more importantly, as you pick up these data points from various sources, where does this whole thing about privacy regulations go?
yeah, no, absolutely. I think the fundamental debate at this point is that how do you make the trade-off between privacy versus convenience? Because if you, and that's going to be, I think, a trade-off that will be present not just here in India, globally, and everybody, people have to make that choice. And I think the regulators would be best placed to actually balance out all the trade-offs that actually come with that. But maybe I answer the first part of it, that what are some data signals that are aiding lenders? At least we see that some of the lenders are actually using it, and I'm sure the folks on this call will actually share a lot more detail about where they see it. But what we see is that as more and more consumers are actually coming online and some online behaviors are getting formed, the reliability of the online indicators is going up. So, for example, if you're basically trying to embed consumer finance in a commerce platform, and if the commerce platform is willing to share details about the address of that customer, to some extent, you can use that address where 5 deliveries historically may have been made in the past as proof that, yes, this residence is confirmed. And then you may take a probabilistic call to say whether you actually need a certain amount of KYC to be done or not. So that is an example of how some of this data on this platform can actually help underwrite and help even figure out risk and fraud. Some of these commerce platforms also have payment instruments that people have historically used. If you can look at what these payment instruments have been, they can give you a bit of an indication of what that affluence is. So the answer to this will differ based on what journey and what platform you're talking about, but there will be user behavior data that is actually going to be additional incremental signals which the lenders can use. Similarly, for small businesses, I think the age-old holy grail is to try and convince a lot of their small businesses to try and route everything digitally. I think we've seen the P2M UPI transaction share actually increase a lot. Now, as you start getting more and more of the turnover routed through a digital means, the confidence for a lender to rely on the signals that will actually come in will increase over a period of time. And then to that extent, how granular is the information about those payments shared will be the other piece that somebody who's lending on the business side will find far more useful. I think the one thing which I would like to say and add over here is that some of this alternate data may not be the core basis of underwriting. At least what we have seen is these are great add-ons to increase the Gini or the reliability of maybe what would be at the heart of it, a more conventional cash flow based estimation. So unlike people relying and thinking that alternate data comes in and we base the full decision on that, maybe for a small segment of customers. But for many, it will be the enhancement, drive the unlock on access and better risk monitoring on an ongoing basis.
No, that's right. And Sachin, back to your point that you also struggle in your organization between the conventional underwriting ways and using big data analytics. How are you trying to marry the two? How are you trying to work with, using both sources or only one source to set up a more, for want of any other word, stronger underwriting processes?
Yeah, so I think so. Rashmi, I'm not a lender. I've never done lending. As you know, I'm a jack of all, master of none. But I think so. Being generalist actually helps because that you can actually take a balanced view. As you know, you would experience this. Generally, the credit and underwriting team come from this background that every borrower is an intentional defaulter. That's the starting point from where you start.
Yeah, we struggle on that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's the wrong thing to approach, right? Because we still have only 5% of the default rate across the industry if you take out the frauds, right? So which means that out of 100 cases you underwrite, only 5% default. So of that, half of that would be default because of the stress of the business and not really intentional default. We as Indians don't borrow to not pay back, right? I don't think that's the intention. So that's the first thing. Second, if you look at it, I'm talking generally the micro SME segment, one of the reasons is that we all have looked at historical information and want to underwrite on the basis of that, and which is not available, we resort to what we say, give me the property and I will underwrite on that basis. Now that is no longer sustainable, right? So that's why you have to constantly think. And third, actually it is about letting people know that there are sets of data and the way industry is transforming. Day before yesterday we presented to all over the world on this GeM Sahay financing platform which we have built along with the GeM and the government of India. Fact is that once we call it virtual profiling. If you have access to somebody's banking, if you have access to somebody's GST, and I'm obviously talking about formal set of customer, not the customer which Kinara would serve. With these two things, you can create actually a virtual profile, right? Because everything which that customer does, you can pull out and basis that you can profile. And if you couple that with bureau, which is currently different, then actually you don't need anything. So that is possible. It is about people adopting. And second, I think so where I struggle. If you go too much towards that direction, which I call the futuristic direction, the first spectrum or first stakeholder of your business, which is your lenders and rating agency, have no acceptance of that.
True.
So in order to even satisfy them, you have to remain stuck into this, virtuous cycle of showing that you are as conventional as anybody else, showing them that you have a portfolio which is more secured, showing them that there is a collateral available to that portfolio. And unfortunately, there are certain number of lenders which are positioned as only fintech. They did such a bad job that when it comes to fintech, so we avoid, last 3 months, this has been somebody, I think some Hython Security wrote about us saying we are top 3 fintechs, listed fintech in Asia. I got scared. I said, now all public sector banks would stop my lines saying, oh, Ugro has become a fintech, which means it is scrupulous, ridiculous, and, not careful lender. So we went into overdrive to tell, no, we are not fintech, right? We are like any other lender, right? We also take property. We also go and meet customers and lend. So that's the challenge. But I think so we are, and that's why I say pandemic actually, all changes happens because of some form of an external force. So when pandemic happened and we wanted to create this, what we call a stress portfolio analysis, everyone said, oh, we can't go and meet customers. How can we tell you that whether the customer is in stress or not? And finally we came, no, that's not true. Given that we only do business in 8 sectors, we have a macro data around sector and subsector. We said, let's create a digital profiling questionnaire. Let it go to the customer, support by a customer calling, let customer fill that pro forma form. And basis that we create what it is looking like. So I'll give you one example. Generally, if you say lending, and if you talk about hospitality, it is no for everyone, right? If you talk about education, it is no for everyone. Our data and our analysis, so that's not true actually. So we created this mortality index, right? Which business would die down in next 6 months and which business would survive. within hospitality, banquet hall has a 90% mortality rate. Fast food chains have only 10% mortality rate. Actually, their cash flows are going up versus banquet halls cash flows are going down, right? All form of education which have any form of digital adaptation are actually generating more cash flow, right? So I think so some of this is you have to constantly prove we all do these things. It's not an easy journey, but I think so there are a few things. Our challenge is to keep external portfolio look like which is like a conventional lender, but still do that good job. That's where we are.
Hartika, while in case of Sachin, he still can access some historical data with the kind of customers that you deal with. In many cases, that's also not available. So how are you using consumer? I mean, Shwetang's talked about a lot of things in terms of what's available out there. What are you doing about it?
Yeah. Look, I want to come back to a point you were making earlier, because there's a real connect here about not as a lender lending to segments that are not in the traditional fare. For us, we do collateral free, property free loans. 100% of our book is property free. And in that scenario, we have to take the extra step of building out the customer engagement piece, helping them understand, which is one of the things you were trying to talk about, like what is moratorium? Moratorium is not it's not a waiver, it's a moratorium, right? Something even as simple as that. We have been doing customer meets for a long time, and we have a Grow with Kinara series. And during the pandemic, this series ended up being a digital series. But what we recognized in having done this work for several years is that while it is true that our customer segment tends to be more informal, what we are also seeing is that they are moving towards formalization. So GST, for example, when GST first came out, and we do constant surveys of our customer segment, maybe 5, maybe 7%, because they did not need GST certification to do their business. They fell under that 75 lakh, 1 crore marker. It's about 5-7%, had GST. Today, that number is more like 45%. And that's in a span of a few years. So we are seeing this move towards formalization, even in the micro enterprise segment. And, and that's a combination of education, what is the value of doing that, and how they can then access certain programs. And also it helps us and in terms of the evaluation. At the end of the day, if the formal data sources are limited, that those limited data sources need to also include the micro enterprises in some of the other fashion. So on one side, we try to do that with GST or banking, like any other lender might. And on the other side, we bolt on this last mile distribution. So we have 110 branches in 6 states, and our customers are only in those geos. And so we then bolt on physical access to those customers, meeting, understanding, going through their actual cash books, etc., as a bolt-on to the data, to the digitization of their data. And the decisioning still remains, entirely algorithmic. The decisioning remains automatic, but you're trying to do a blended model between available data, source to data, and then add-on data as well. And that's how we've been looking at the space where, while Bharat is becoming India, it's going to take a little bit of time, and we're ahead of that, but we're making sure that we have. Sorry, someone trying to say something? Oh, okay. We're trying to get ahead of that, and also making sure that we have, a way and a path to service customers who are on that formalization journey also.
Right. So yours is still a lot more of a touch and feel. Right, at this point in time, moving towards digitization, moving towards a phase where a lot of this data is out there available for you and then can be used. So you're on that transition path, as you say, at this point in time with your customers.
Yeah, I would say we are actually already there in a blended model, right? So we start with what is available and automate the decision, and if that works for what the customer needs, then it can. Our lead to disbursement time frame is 3 to 4 days, so it can be really, really fast, even though it's a micro enterprise loan in a 3 to 4 lakh segment, right? The flip of that is, how do we get further down, further that turnaround time further down, and that is about this formalization that is happening and will continue to happen even with this segment.
Right. Yeah. Gaurav, your views on the consumer side, individuals, and there's a lot of data available on individual consumer behavior out there. Sometimes it makes life easy. Sometimes it just makes life very confusing in terms of what to do with that whole host of data available. So, your views on that?
So
And
Rashmi, I
how can you use it for creating that kind of an infrastructure and uh, change your underwriting policies, etc. For yourself?
So Rashmi, our approach as a company and how we've come at the business has been a fully digital approach right from the first day. So we've chosen the segment where, we'll have the data points available that we need to offer a fully digital offering, right? And that is why our product is also designed to be kind of a small ticket loan, right? So we do not take large exposures because we're not doing some of the traditional underwriting that you still need today if you want to, underwrite larger size loans, right? So interestingly though, I mean, what we found is that, the traditional kind of cash flow underwriting versus the alternate data underwriting, I mean, to take, Shachindra's classification, I think that's apt at a high level. So what we've actually found is that for us, the alternate data is fairly reliable, and actually that accounts for the bulk of our decisioning in our models, right? So and over time, that's kind of kept improving as we've experimented with more and more data points and kind of got more data, refined our models. So I think at an individual level, when you're lending to individuals, this data works fairly well, right? So yeah, I mean, that is our conclusion, and I expect that ratio will only keep improving with time, as we get more information. And again, here, I mean, this, what Shwetang was talking about, the trade-off between privacy and kind of convenience becomes all the more apt, right? Because if I'm saying that the majority of my decisioning is coming from alternate data, then if I don't have access to that data, I cannot do that underwriting. Right? So I think here, I mean, obviously, ultimately, it's going to be a policy decision, and the regulators will kind of decide, what that balance is going to be. But I think generally a principle of informed consent along with transparency. So as long as you're conveying to the customer, what information you need, and as long as you're getting their informed consent, I think that becomes critical, right? Because ultimately, then without that, you're back to the traditional tools, right? I mean, give me your bank statement, tell me what your salary is, and I'll give you a loan based on that, right? So
I'll give you a loan 10 days from now or 15 days from now then.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. All right. We're kind of nearing the end of the session. So maybe I'll just do a round robin here, ask you all two things that you're working on in your organizations to make sure that you do have a robust, and it could be any of the areas. It could be in the areas of collection. It could be in the areas of underwriting, customer sourcing. So any two things that you're doing differently today than in February of 2020. Sachin, can I start with you? You're on mute, Sachin.
First is working very, very hard. All right. So I think
goes without saying. I think we're all putting in extra hours these days. Absolutely, yeah. Portfolio.
Second, I think so that I am very convinced that our aspiration and mission of, our view is that if you have to, serve MSMEs in India, you can only do when you do it in size, right? Because otherwise, it is such a large gap that you cannot be a meaningful, and player and cannot create impact. So our mission is to take 1% market share by 2025. And that's very small, but in absolute terms, it is roughly around 25,000 crores. And to do that, I think so we are, this 4-5 months of downtime actually gave us time to think through hard in terms of creating partnership, expanding our physical reach, accelerating our liability side, and convincing lender that why we are good. And now we are executing that. So I think so any gap in terms of our strategy has got completely filled. We know what we have to do, and we know that we cannot get to that size if we just focus on just one small segment. That's why we focus on right from 1 lakh rupees loan to 2.5 crore of loan. Not that everything we have to service on our own, And that's why we're creating this what we call a multi-channel distribution platform for that.
Okay, thanks. Hardika?
Yeah, so the two things, one that I was mentioning before that surprised us was that our customers are getting more online, more digital. And so what we are doing and recognizing that while they're getting digital, what they really want is vernacular tech. And so what we've been working on is vernacular tech to engage with them, both on on digital platforms and also on our platform. So we bring them to us digitally, but using vernacular tech. And that's something we are doing that's different from what we were doing a year ago. The second thing is what we're doing, what we were already doing a year ago, but doing more of it, right? I feel like this year has really put a spotlight on MSMEs far more than ever before. And within that MSME, or at least the micro enterprise segment, the collateral free segment is getting further left behind. And how do we drive financial inclusion of this segment, which is something Kinara has been doing for the last 8-9 years, but we are trying, we're finding new ways to do that, including special programs for women entrepreneurs. We already had one last year called Har Vikas, which was for women entrepreneurs, and now we are actually committed more capital, including a bond, just for women entrepreneurs and livelihoods for women entrepreneurs. So for us, the focus remains on financial inclusion, focus remains on this micro enterprise segment, and driving more businesses to to sustain as we come back from this pandemic into hopefully the V-shaped recovery that we are all expecting.
Okay. Thank you, Hardika. Gaurav, what about you?
Yeah, so I think two things that we're working on. One is building out a kind of bigger and diverse portfolio of products. And by that, what I mean is, different customer segments and offering them different types of products to serve their needs. The objective behind that is twofold. One is to increase the addressable market that we're going after, right? And the second is to actually, mitigate kind of business risk, right? Because again, in this business, you have a lot of external factors that can affect the business, both in terms of the macro environment and also policy, right? So I think both of these can have different effects. So in order to mitigate that, we're working as a company to build out a kind of larger and more diversified portfolio. And secondly, what I touched on earlier in terms of customer engagement, right? So I think that is something that kind of got kicked off during the pandemic, but it's something that we're focusing on very keenly now, which is how do we have better communication and engagement with the customers so as to help them at all parts of their journey, right? Whether it's at the point of onboarding them, whether it's at the kind of, underwriting stage, so that customers do not go into default status. And then also during collections, right? How do we engage better so that the customer has a better experience and we as a business can have better outcomes? So I think for us as a company, those are the two things.
So I would just rephrase what we heard from three of you, and Shwetang, I'll come back to you to summarize that point. But I think one thing we are hearing, what Sachin said was scale and size is important. If we have to create a reliable lending infrastructure, you just cannot be standing on the sides with some small numbers. So scale and size is important. Hardika, your point about customer centricity in terms of reaching out to them in vernacular language, so that, and linked to what Gaurav was saying, that there has to be customer specific programs, products that need to get created. And I think Sachin also referred to that as well. And the whole thought of we've lent the money and we'll just go back and meet the customer when the money has to be taken back, or if he defaults, is over. That whole theory is over. That whole customer engagement is now has to be done through the entire loan tenor. It's through the entire journey from onboarding to, even if the guy has a moratorium, you still need to be in touch with them to know what's happening with them. And that's what's changed for all of us lenders. And I think we realize that that's what's required to make sure that we do have a strong lending infrastructure in place. Shwetang, anything else? Last words from you. Anything else that you think the lenders should be mindful of? I mean, you've spoken about customer, and customer is the king. And by the way, Sachin, I did not bring up the point about lenders because I'm sure if I had brought that point about how lenders are important to create a reliable infrastructure for us, the conversation would have never gone into other areas. But Shwetank, last words. What do you think?
I think firstly, I agree with all the comments that have been made by all of you all in terms of what the focus areas are. I think we're on a multi-decadal increased penetration of lending story in India. I think the only other thing which I would think will probably have fundamental impact on how business is done is the speed with which we adopt some of the interoperability enablers like Account Aggregator and Oken, which will allow data to actually flow. And will reinvent some of the business models. We did not touch that, but I think it's uncertain at this stage how far out that is. But I do feel that over the course of the next couple of years, that will also reshape a lot of the business models. So that's probably the only other point, and it is actually good for the ecosystem and the customer as some of that comes in with all the other mega trends that we've talked about.
Perfect. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for joining in and with your views. Bhavna, back to you.